Coming up, we're talking to Olympic BMX biker and gold medalist Connor Fields.
Connor Fields has a unique story. He went to the Olympics 3 times. One time he choked and came in 7th. One time he nearly died, and one time he won. He's going to talk about the ways this shaped his life and his mindset on the next episode of Untrained.
You know, when I woke up that morning, I thought the worst case scenario and the absolute worst thing that could have happened to me was to get 4th place. And then as I laid there in the hospital bed 5 days later, 4th place didn't seem so bad. The perspective shift that it granted me of how to kind of live in both worlds, where I think before my accident, I only lived in the I want to be the best world. And I didn't know how to live in the grateful world.
Welcome to Untrained. Hi, Whitney.
Hi, Iris.
Hey, we have a great guest. We have an athlete as a guest today. Love it. So Connor Fields is a 3-time Olympian, 2-time world champion, and the first American to win Olympic BMX gold at the 2016 Rio Games. Then at the 2021 Tokyo Games, he suffered a severe crash resulting in life-threatening injuries requiring extensive rehab. Connor has been emphasizing focus on resilience and gained new appreciation for the importance of mental health through his recovery. He's now a keynote speaker, the host of PBS's Outdoor Nevada. We're going to talk about that. Is it Nevada or Nevada? You tell me.
It's Nevada, and thank you for asking.
Thanks, Connor. Nevada. Nevada. And an NBC Sports BMX commentator. His inspiring story has been featured on the Today Show, Sports Illustrated, and Vanity Fair. Connor motivates audiences with his journey of recovery, peak performance strategies, and the powerful message emphasizing the importance of even the smallest decision. Welcome, Connor.
Thanks for having me. And I'm so glad you asked about Nevada versus Nevada, because that is how we instantly know you're a tourist, is if you start saying Nevada.
Okay, Nevada. We're going to remember that, Whitney. Note to selves.
Note to self. I don't know. I'm a tourist at heart, I think, probably.
We had a whole bunch of things we wanted to talk about. Whitney, do you want to kick us off? You had a great question.
Well, so first of all, Connor Fields, we are so curious about your sport. And, one of the things we've learned to appreciate, and one of the reasons for this podcast, is that the way our sport shapes us shapes how we move through the world, given the strengths it requires in us and the training. So what are the ways, tell us a little bit about your sport and how it shapes you as a human.
The way that I always describe my sport when I'm asked about it, because it is a common question. It's not the most popular, well-known sport in the world.
You're talking to a fencer and a rower.
Yeah, I sit on my ass and go backwards. She stabs people, and you're flying through the air. So yeah,
exactly. That's right. We have to have the explosive power out of the start of like a 100-meter sprinter. And then we have to have the endurance of like a 400-meter sprinter, because our races are between 30 and 40 seconds. And we do not pace. You just sprint as fast as you can for 30 to 40 seconds. We have to have the balance and proprioception of a gymnast, because we're jumping 50 feet and then you have to land on this tiny little thing. While you're jumping through the air, you might be elbowing another athlete. Dealing with the elements. Maybe it's raining, maybe it's windy. And then you kind of have to have the mental fortitude of like a boxer or a UFC fighter, because you'll be sitting there in the starting line, and in the race in front of you, someone is getting carted off with a crazy injury, and everybody who's competed has had injuries, but then you just have to kind of block it out and go. And, it wasn't until I was done competing that I realized some of the conversations we would have of like, oh, he's fine. He just broke his collarbone. Like that is not normal. It's just kind of like our normal, but it's not normal in outside world. But how that kind of has shaped me, is being good at a lot of different things, and as well as every single course we race is different. It's never the same. And so you have to be really adaptable, and you have to be able to learn on the fly. Those are all things that I've taken from sport into life. But more than anything, it's just the toughness, because, I'm not saying you don't have to be tough in other sports, but, no disrespect to fencing or to rowing, but you can't die if you make a mistake in those sports.
Right.
In our sport, the consequence is very high. So you get really tough really quick because you make a couple mistakes and you break a few bones and you have no choice but to be.
And when you say tough, do you mean sort of resilient? You have to bounce back, like literally from your injuries, or tough focused? Or say a little bit more about what tough means for your sport.
All of it. In our sport, we do not have lanes like a track and field sport or event or a swimming event, excuse me. You don't have lanes where you just are going as fast as you can in a straight line and no one's going to mess with you. It's a free for all. And so you could do everything right, in preparation and training and even in execution. And there's so many factors that could go wrong, whether it's another athlete hits you on purpose, another athlete makes a mistake and accidentally hits you. You have a mechanical, because we have machines that we have to work with. So flat tires, chain falls off, part comes loose. All that kind of stuff can go wrong. So you could do everything right and it still doesn't work. And then you have to kind of learn that resilience and that toughness of how to overcome that. And I think the other big one that you learn is the ability to compartmentalize, because there has been plenty of situations and times where I have been getting ready to compete, like behind the starting line, and somebody broke their leg right in front of me. And then they're like, all right, it's your turn now. And that is you have to turn your brain off to an extent. And I definitely noticed my frontal lobe fully developed, because when I was 19, I didn't think twice. But the older I got, I started to notice and be like, yeah, maybe this is not the right idea.
So you've explained two things about this adaptability and agility and the ability to continue to move forward, resilience. Does any of that, how does that translate into your world today? Because you've retired from your sport. So do you feel like you utilize these on a daily basis or while you're working? How does it show up for you?
I would say that the number one thing that I learned through my Olympic and my athletic experience is, if you put your mind to something and you dedicate and you do everything possible, I have no doubt that I could achieve whatever I set my mind to, within reason, of course, right? Like, I will never, if I could wake up tomorrow and say I want to be a professional fencer, not going to happen. Like, that's just not in my genetic ability cards to be good at that. But if I was to wake up tomorrow and say, I want to go to school and get a degree in fill in blank, I believe that I could do the work, have a routine, set goals, step by step, follow the process, and get the job done. And I would say that's the number one thing that I was able to take from my athletic experience. And how that's carried over is, when something like the opportunity for hosting Outdoor Nevada comes up, I'm not a TV host. I've never hosted a TV show before. But I'm like, okay, I can figure this out. I figured out how to win the Olympics. I'm pretty sure I could figure this out. And that would be the number one thing that I think I've taken. And it's just that belief in trusting the process if you work really hard.
And one of the things that we often talk amongst ourselves and with our athletic guests is sort of, what did you have to untrain in order to be the best version of yourself? Like, for example, my sport was all about effort. So I really believe that for a long time, effort would solve anything if you applied enough of it. And it doesn't always work that way. So could you say a little bit about, either through some of the transitions you've had or challenges, or just on a day-to-day basis, or just age, what you've had to untrain?
What's been really hard for me is when you're an athlete, I guess maybe not everybody, but it's common that you become a very black and white thinker. You either won or you lost. You either achieved the goal or you didn't. You made the team or you did not. And so, the real world, is a little bit more gray. There's a lot more room to move, and it's not as much like you didn't either win or lose in life, right? And so that was the hardest part for me, is that I was so hard on myself, demanding that I would be, 100% successful at whatever I did. Or just even something as simple as like knowing what I wanted to do with my life. And if I did, I was so sure for the first 10 years of adulthood, and now I didn't know. And so that was the hardest part, is kind of learning how to live in the gray, and learning that, you can win and lose at the same thing at the same time. Right. Whereas in sport, that doesn't work that way. That was kind of the biggest challenge. I'm still today working on that And, my girlfriend and I all the time, she's very different than I am in that way. She's really good at the gray. And, she's been helping me kind of learn how to unlearn that and just exist and do my best, but just kind of exist.
Could you share one practice or way that you, when you find yourself in, I just lost, or I'm the best in the world, I'm totally won, how you work with the gray when you need to?
Well, I think it's as simple as, they're not handing out trophies or awards or medals for all the things that I'm working on. And so, what is success? Mm-hmm. And that's been the hardest part because it's so clear cut in sport. You got the trophy, you got the medal, you got the place, the result. When I'm hosting my show and I want to do a good job, what is success? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's some people are going to love me, some are going to hate me, no matter how good I am, right? And so it's kind of learning how to just, I guess, not rely so much on the external validation, where in sport it's a little bit more external because it's somebody else telling you what place you got or how you did, and learning how to just be happy with my efforts and kind of score myself, but also be kind to myself versus that external validation.
Whitney has a word for that. She calls it invisible victories. That a lot of times when we're redefining success or really looking for a bigger sense of fulfillment, right? We're not looking at all those externally validated things. We're looking at internally validated things that people might not see, that you have to personally validate yourself around. So I'm going to credit you, Whitney, for invisible victories because I use it all the time for people, and that's exactly it.
I like that.
You can give them to yourself. You can leave your next TV show with like medals all around your neck on the inside.
Yeah, and I remember talking to my sports psychologist when I retired, and we were having a conversation about how I would succeed or I would set goals and I would do things and I'd be happy and I'd be proud of myself and I'd be excited, but it always felt a little bit lackluster. And she said something to me. She said, Connor, you won the Olympics. You're probably never going to have a rush like that when it comes to like victory ever again. Mm. And so that's not to say that you're not going to have those same feelings and the same pride and the same, fulfillment in other areas. But it's not going to be the same as winning in front of 10,000 people and then going on the Today Show and having a month-long celebration and doing that. And that was kind of an eye-opener to me of like, I'm chasing, I guess, for lack of a better word, I'm chasing this high that I probably am not going to find again. And I had to learn how to pivot that and not say replace it, but just be content with the level of happiness and fulfillment that I can get from these other projects. And then it begs the age-old question, is it better to have loved and have lost or to have never loved at all?
Right. Was it a blessing or a curse? Right.
Right. I have crossed the finish line and won the Olympics, and I've had that ultimate adrenaline rush. It makes it hard because, what else is going to give you that kind of a rush,
Yeah, we see that a lot of times in our clients who are always on this treadmill, right? So they're on a treadmill of trying to get to the next thing, to be validated, to have that rush. And I think it's sometimes being able to slow down the treadmill and say, maybe this is really about you and how you define success. And that's kind of what you're saying. And is there a sense of greater fulfillment there? And is it more lasting and sustainable? That's the question.
And I think one of the things that's unique is that most people in their career, sort of the medal gets bigger and bigger and bigger as they go up the chain, right? Whereas you had the experience of like, there's not going to be another one that big. So I've got to learn to adjust now. So that's where you have so much to offer, folks, because people really like the athletic mindset and analogies in the work world.
Yeah, and I think for me, the biggest thing, I love working on myself and projects such as the TV show and learning how to be the best TV host that I can. Or, I commentated the Olympics for NBC last summer, and that was a fun new challenge. But where I derive a lot of joy these days is by helping others. And as somebody who only ever competed in an individual sport that has no team element whatsoever, I only ever was on Team Connor. And so now when I can help other people, that is a totally new experience for me that is so rewarding and brings me so much fulfillment and joy in a different way. Whether it's I've coached athletes to their goals, a national championship or whatever it was. And then being able to step back and sit on the sidelines and watch them over the moon because they just won their big event is so amazing. Or doing a keynote speech and having somebody come up to me after and say, this concept really has motivated and inspired me. I'm going to action it by doing this. And then 6 months later, they send me a message on LinkedIn saying like, hey, I did your thing and it worked. That is such a cool feeling that I never got to experience before. And that's been like something that I've learned to really enjoy as opposed to, between the age of 18 and 29, it was, I'm going to do this for myself so I can be the best and I can win this event.
Yeah.
Well, that's put. Yeah, well, that's how it was, right? So at some point, you had to focus on yourself, and we've both had to do that, Whitney and I, when we were training in our sports. And I think that's part of the learning when you transition out of this, or even, for some of my clients when they become leaders, is figuring out, like, if I'm running my team, I'm no longer deriving satisfaction just from my work, right? They're not getting praise for that, but I'm getting praise for getting my team over the finish line, so to speak. So I think that really has some application there, because you have to move up, and as you move up the chain, you have people, and your validation and your wins aren't just about what you're producing.
And then bring it back to what we talked about earlier. The hardest part is the control of when it was just me, and I was an individual in an individual sport. If I won or if I lost, it was on me. Most of the time, barring a mechanical or an accident or whatever, but 99% of the time it's on me. Oftentimes these days, I'm having to put trust in other people. And that has been an adjustment as well, because that's something I'm not used to. And so trusting and delegating are new challenges that I'm learning. And in some ways, I've lived 10 lifetimes and I have the experience of an 80-year-old. In other ways, I am a 16-year-old when it comes to my experience with certain things. So it's a thing. But one of my favorite things, and I'm sure you both can relate to this as well, being an athlete makes you coachable, especially if you respect your coach and if you really believe in what they're teaching you. Like, you're like, please tell me, show me what to do, teach me the way, and you internalize. And as I transitioned out of the athlete world, I've realized not everybody is like that.
Right. Well, Connor, you are rare in that you've won an Olympic medal and you've had that experience. You're also rare that you almost died and you had to come back from that. So I'd love to hear what you'd like to share about that journey and what you like to share about that journey. Because again, not many people have gone through that.
Yeah, it's funny. I do hold a distinction. There's no way to double check this in all Olympic history, but I'm fairly certain that I'm the only person who's won the Olympics and nearly died while competing at the Olympics. So it's the rage. It doesn't get much more of a rage than that. Right. I got seventh once in there too, but that's on the scale of it, that doesn't even register. For me, it was like everything that could have ever gone wrong went wrong. It was the worst case scenario. I had an accident live during the semifinal, during COVID. Family wasn't there, into a coma. And my parents and my family and friends had to sit and wait for news as I was in a coma in Tokyo, Japan. But with that being said, everything worked out in the best way possible to where I was able to make a full recovery against all odds. I had 4 brain bleeds. I had injury to my frontal lobe, parietal lobe, corpus callosum, and my brain stem. had a lot of things done a little bit different, I could have been dead on impact. It was, I had to be intubated. I stopped breathing. It was the worst case scenario, but it all, this is going to really put it lightly, but all's well that ends well. It was the worst case, but everything worked out. I had amazing people around me. If you're going to get hurt, the Olympics is the place to do it because you get the world's best care. I went straight to brain rehabilitation at the University of Utah. And then I had, an 18-month-long rehabilitation process. I had to relearn how to drive and pass my driver's test. I had to, go into speech therapy because I was having trouble. There's a whole lot of cognitive rehabilitation there. And then as I started to feel better, my reward was shoulder reconstruction because they didn't want to put me under while I was still dealing with my brain stuff. The perspective shift, and I talked about this in my keynotes, the perspective shift is the big thing. When I woke up that morning, I thought the worst case scenario and the absolute worst thing that could have happened to me was to get fourth place and get another Olympic participation certificate, so I was there to win. And then as I laid there in the hospital bed 5 days later, fourth place didn't seem so bad. And it was just kind of that perspective shift as, an elite athlete, and I'm sure you've been around them. So many are just so laser focused, tunnel vision on trying to be a champion and trying to be the best. And you do need to have a piece of that if you want to be the best. I say this in my presentation too, like if you want to be the best in the world at something, you have to be a little crazy. Like there's something loose up here that made me wake up in the morning every day for over a decade and say, I want to be the best in the world at something and I will do whatever it takes. But that perspective shift when all I wanted was to be able to feel normal. I just wanted to drive to go get Chipotle. I just wanted to be able to stay awake for longer than a few hours at a time. The perspective shift that it granted me of how to kind of live in both worlds, where when I host my show, I want to be the best. I want to win an Emmy. But I'm so happy to have this opportunity to host this show and to be there. And it's learning how to live in both worlds at the same time, where I think before my accident, I only lived in the I want to be the best world. And I didn't know how to live in the grateful world.
I love that way you phrase it. Could you say more about living in both worlds? Because I think so many people can relate to that. I can relate to that.
Yeah, I think it's natural for any high achiever to want to be the best or to want to hit their goal or to, whatever their target is. But with that being said, it's that perspective of if you don't hit that goal, sun's coming up tomorrow. You still have family and friends, you still have a purpose, still a reason. There's still people that are grateful that you're here. And I think it's learning how to live in both worlds and just not getting too far down either pathway, right? And where I don't go so far down the pathway of wanting to be a champion that you'll do anything to get it and, sacrifice the other side. But at the same time, and I think this is something that doesn't get talked about enough. I also don't think that it's okay to be so okay with mediocrity that you don't ever set a goal and you never go for anything. And you're just so okay being below average, and you're like, but I love myself. You have to find that middle ground and live in both worlds and be okay kind of doing that. And yeah, that's, I guess it's not something I plan on talking about, but that's how I put it.
Why is that so important to you or that people push themselves out of mediocrity?
I think people are capable of more than they think they are most of the time. Now, I've been very lucky that I had great people in my life, coaches, family, people around me that always pushed me to reach heights that I did not even think that I could reach. And I think that, not everybody has that, but I think that with the right push, the right support system, and the right motivation, I think people can reach higher than they thought they could. And everybody has different targets or different levels or things that are important to them. But I think that people can typically go further than they thought they could. And that's on a side note, I also am such a believer in pushing yourself physically in fitness and doing things you don't want to do and going to the gym on a day when you don't feel like going to the gym and running that 5K because you set the goal and you're going to go through the training and you're going to run that 5K even though you hate running. True story. I hate running. My girlfriend made me run a 5K, but I set the plan and I did it. But I think that's so important because if you can push yourself to do hard things in that world, one, it's healthy and there's the obvious health benefits, but two, it can help you in whatever it is that you do to continue to push yourself and have that belief that you can talk yourself through wanting to quit. And there are studies that have shown that you can actually change the chemistry of your brain by doing hard things on purpose to make yourself more resilient.
I'm having flashbacks to our last conversation with Kathy Delaney Smith. Are you, Iris? And act as if and get your head out of your ass. You can do more than you think, basically.
There's definitely a pendulum swing right now for more hardiness. I guess the science is around hardiness. I think there's definitely more coming out nowadays where the pendulum's trying to get to some place where we're not just letting go of all the things or not pushing ourselves, but really applying some level of challenge or hardiness to ourselves, some more resilience training. But I do, I'm not just thinking about Kathy Delaney Smith, but I'm thinking about Karin Davies, who's also one of the most decorated rowers of all time in the Harvard Hall of Fame and a friend to both of us. And she talked about a sense of balance, and that's kind of what you're talking about. And I'll talk about it in both ways. One where you have you're holding your goal and you want it, so you hold it. But at the same time, you have these other anchors in your life that the goal isn't the only thing that defines you or is who you are. And one of the things she talks about is I came home with my silver medal and I was showing everyone, but it wasn't enough. Everyone's like, where's your gold, right? The other day I was teaching a CrossFit class and a 12-year-old was like, so did you win, right? That's always the answer. So no matter what you do, it's kind of never enough, right? So you have to like hold the goal, but also have these other things in your life that define you, that you find joy and fulfillment. So there's some sort of level of balance. And the same thing goes for what you're talking about is when we're in the pursuit of hardiness, I think there's a level of balance and you said it really well. I think there's balance when it comes to setting your goals. There's balance when it comes to having support around your goals, right? Because we don't want to just set goals to, my husband went out in the cold one day and was like, I'm going to work on this. And then he got pneumonia. So like you can go too far, right? Like you have to have a sense of hardiness and you do have to challenge yourself, but it can't be so far out of it that you really don't reach it. And I do believe like having people in your life like you had, and you said, I was really fortunate to have all these coaches and all these people. That is the key. I mean, that's the key to all of that. That's the key to like, if I want to make an Olympic gold medal, I got to surround myself with good people. If I want to be a really good leader, I got to surround myself with good people. If I want to reach my goals and become more hardy, and persevere more, I can't just do that on my own. So I'm just adding that this is a whole thread to that. And what you're bringing up is so true.
Yeah. Well, and two things. One, it doesn't have to be an Olympic coach. You could also just have a friend who's an accountability partner and you guys work together on things and support each other, push each other. I have great friends who are in completely different industries and we just are each other's biggest cheerleaders. Or if we have a problem, we can pick up the phone and say, hey, what do you think about this? And it's often great to get a perspective from somebody who's completely uneducated about the topic that we're talking about. I think that helps. But one thing, I'm going to tangent real quick and I'll come back. One thing that you were talking about to jog this memory. So when I was 19, I went to my first games, London 2012, and I got 7th. And, I actually was the favorite. I was the number 1 seed in the final and I choked, which is a completely different story. But when I got home, keep in mind, I'm 19, I had graduated high school 1 year earlier. I got home and people would ask me like, oh, you went to the Olympics. That's amazing. What color is your medal? Mm-hmm. And I'd be like, oh, I got 7th. And they'd be like, oh, I'm so sorry. Or they would say, what happened? And the way that the American media covers the Olympics is they make it seem like everybody just comes home with buckets of medals like Michael Phelps and Simone Biles, right? But 85% of the athletes that go don't medal. 450 Olympic athletes every summer go to the Olympics and don't medal. And there were times like, I was 19, I was a bit more hot-headed, but there were times where I wanted to be like, you know how freaking hard it is to get 7th at the Olympics? Do you know? What place did you get at the Olympics? That's what I thought. Like, it was crazy.
I always love giving these demos, Whitney and Connor, to this group of like middle schoolers or elementary school kids. And it's just so funny. They're just like, oh, you made the Olympic team and it was in 2000, like were there horse and buggies and you didn't make an Olympic medal. It was like, now I've become a complete dud in the gym. They don't want to do fencing anymore because I haven't won a medal. And also I went to the Olympics when it was apparently before electricity. So there it is.
Yeah. Did you take a boat over to get there?
Apparently.
You just got back. Took a while.
So I love the idea of these transitions that you've had. You've had so many. So you went to you said the London Olympics, and then you went to, and then you won a gold at the Rio Games. You almost died. I'm not even laughing because I'm like laughing. I'm just like, whoa, what an experience! But
it's a wild story.
It's a wild story.
Right, you went to the Olympics. You choked, almost died, and won. Great. You've got all the experiences.
It's never a dull moment. It's never nice to just go to one and get third.
You have lots to talk about. I'm glad you're a keynote speaker.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask more. We talked about having a performance psychologist, and I'm interested in that because I work with a bunch of performance psychologists. You've worked with them, and during these transitions, you've really kind of leaned into that, and you've leaned into the psych health piece of it too. I'd love to know some more of your journey, what you've learned, what you're taking with you in these transition periods, stuff that you've worked on with your performance psychologists that have been really helpful to you. I'd love for you to share that.
Give our audience some nuggets.
Well, I guess a couple quick things before I share my personal stuff. I actually have an anecdote during my my keynotes where I talk about hiring a sports psychologist. And I think that's kind of a funny term, though, because we're not in there talking about the X's and O's. We're not reviewing film. Athletes put the word sport in front of psychologists because it doesn't hurt our ego as bad when we go talk to a sport psychologist. You're in there talking about the same things that you would be talking about. Every now and then you'll talk about pressure in the moment or whatever, but you're usually talking about like, oh, I got this trauma at home, or oh, I'm struggling with my finances. Well, how do I get through this? Or I don't believe in myself. Mm-hmm. It's all the same things that you're going to talk about anyway, if you're an athlete or not. But us fragile, delicate flowers of athletes, we have to put the word sport in front of it to not hurt our feelings at all. Which I think is
said.
Kind of funny.
Thank you for saying that. Couldn't say it better myself.
So it was cool. So I saw actually the transition from the Olympic team. When I made my first national team and was a part of the Olympic team in 2010, talking to a sports psychologist was not very common. And those who did it kind of did it on the slot, especially in my sport. I mean, we're macho BMX crazy guys, right? To where at the end of my run, before I retired in the 2020s, it was actually required. If you were at a certain level of athlete, you actually had to, in order to receive your funding, you had to meet with a sports psychologist. And it was cool to see the transition because, come 2018, 2019, people would be like, hey, you coming to lunch? No, I got an appointment with my sports psychologist. And it was just completely accepted and normal. And I always tell people, who's your favorite athlete? They probably work with a sports psychologist. They probably work, depending on who, they probably work with multiple. So I think that kind of the acceptance has been cool. So I think for me, the biggest thing has been, I guess, twofold. Number one, as a man, there is an old habit of let's hold everything in until we're 55 and have a heart attack. And never talk about anything and never deal with feelings or emotions and just bury. And so what I've learned is even on a smaller scale that's not healthy and that it always comes out in one way or another. And so at a base level, it's just nice to have a safe place to talk about things. Struggles with, could be my family. It could be my athletics, it could be with my partner, it could be with whoever, whatever. but just have a safe place to kind of work through some of these problems. But I think the biggest thing is just getting to know myself. And a sports psychologist doesn't give you like magic fairy dust to fix you, or a psychologist doesn't give you magic fairy dust. They give you tools and skills that you can apply to yourself and you can learn. And so for me, it was just learning how to talk to myself, learning to recognize when I was going down certain pathways and stop myself, learning how to communicate better with those around me, be it coach, teammate, partner, whoever. Those are all the big things. And then also just learning how to like forgive myself, because again, tying back to the high performer, I would get second place in the national championships and it would be a catastrophic failure. Or I would only win 5 races in a season and I would be like, I suck, I should quit. And it was kind of learning how to forgive myself and understand that balance of, it's okay that you want to win everything that you touch, and that's why you are who you are, but you also have to give yourself a little slack because nobody wins everything that they touch.
Yeah. And I'm going to ask a question here because, I do performance coaching with corporate folks now. And I 100% agree. There's no external fairy dust, but I do believe that when we connect with ourselves more fully, see ourselves more accurately, and can sustain that kind live in both worlds relationship, there is something a little magical about that.
Absolutely. And you never know what the nugget is, or what the advice is, or what the key is that a good coach can give you to unlock that next level. And be it in performance psychology, be it in business coaching, or in athletics, that one little thing that they can give you, hopefully it's more than one, but it sometimes just takes one little thing. But you have to put yourself into that position to be open to receiving it.
And I'm going to double click on something you said, because I say it all the time to my clients. What's the story you're telling yourself about that? Because when we get clear and conscious about that, we have a lot of power versus telling ourselves like you said, nothing ever is going to be successful ever again, or whatever the story is. When we call ourselves on that, we can create a new one. So I just wanted to highlight that one.
We've gone many different places, and I think there's a lot to learn from your journey. We haven't learned everything.
Gosh.
Yeah.
So much.
So I'd love, is there something that out of all of these things, or maybe something we haven't talked about, that you want our audience to take away from your experiences?
That's such a broad question. I guess the number one thing is it's Nevada, not Nevada.
Yes,
you got it.
No, I think one of my biggest things, and I've learned this as I've gotten older, is nobody has it figured out, and you never figure it out. You're always in a state of just trying to get better, or you should just always be in a state of trying to get better. And whether it's in athletics, relationships, parenting, life, whatever it is, nobody can sit here and be like, yep, I know the answers, I'm perfect. And even the highest performers, and I'm around a lot of them in different industries and in sport, they have people that they lean on and they rely on too. So if you're listening to this and you don't feel like you have it all figured out, no one else does either. So lean on people that can help you. Be that person for somebody else to lean on, and just continue to try to get better every day.
And if you're not watching, there's fairy dust appearing everywhere. There's the fairy dust, the beauty, the magic, the truth.
Yeah. Whitney, what are you taking away from today's discussion? And then I have mine. I'll finish up.
I mean, it's just, I have a lot of respect for you, Connor Fields. The journey you've gone on, both, getting your ass to the Olympics so many times, but just your growth mindset. Like, I'd love to give you a trophy for your growth mindset and sharing what you've learned and your humility with others. It's just beautiful, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, I think a lot of people come to Olympians, especially gold medalists such as yourself, and they go, tell me what I need and the mindsets I need to win. And I think we're asking a wholly wrong question of those athletes. I think we have to ask them, What is it that you felt? What did you go through? What did you do at your hardest moments? And I think that's what you're coming across with, Connor, is at every point you're saying, yeah, I did win, but here are the hardest moments. And I really learned something in these hardest moments. And I think we're really asking the wrong questions of the athletes. So start asking the athletes and the successful people in your hardest and most difficult moments, what are the things that got you through? How did you get through? And I think that's
before and after.
Before and after. Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So thanks for sharing yours.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing your story, Connor, with us. And at the end of every podcast, what do we say, Whitney?
Keep untraining.
Keep untraining. If you like what you hear, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, go to Apple Podcasts. We love to hear from you. So please give us a review. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks. See you next time.